Hello, grade 10 learners. Let this video guide you in understanding the topic Theorems on Arcs, Chords, and Central Angles. At the end of this video lesson, you will be able to describe congruent circles and congruent arcs, familiarize, analyze, and apply these theorems related to central angles, arcs, and chords in a circle or incongruent circles. Simulan muna natin with congruent circles. Congruent circles are circles with congruent radii. In our example, we have segment AM is the radius of circle A and segment TH is the radius of circle T. If segment AM is congruent to segment TH, let's say segment AM measures 5 units and segment TH is also 5 units, so they are congruent. So we say that circle A is congruent to circle T. Next, let's have congruent arcs. Congruent arcs are arcs of the same circle or of congruent circles with equal measures. So let's have this example. In circle I, arc MT is congruent to arc KS. So sa napag-aralan natin last time, that the degree measure of the arc is equal to the degree measure of the central angle that intercepts it. So since our angle or arc KS is the intercepted arc of angle KIS, and angle KIS is 65 degrees, so arc KS is also 65 degrees. Likewise, so we have angle TIM and its intercepted arc is arc MT. And since angle TIM measures 65 degrees, so its intercepted arc also measures 65 degrees. And since arcs KS and TM both have measures 65 degrees, so they are congruent. Then if circle I is congruent to circle E, so dapat masatisfy yung condition na yon if we have two or more circles. So circle I is congruent to circle E, then we say that arcs TM, KS, and NW are also congruent. This time, isa-isahin naman natin ang theorems on central angles, arcs, and chords. The first theorem states that if two central angles of a circle or congruent circles are congruent, then the corresponding minor arcs are congruent. So in this theorem, makikita natin yung relationship between the minor arcs and the central angles. So tingnan natin yung first example. In circle E, we have angle SET is congruent to angle NEO. And it is evident kasi pareho sila ng degree measures. Angle SET measures 50 degrees and angle NEO also measures 50 degrees. So they are congruent. So since these two angles are congruent, then according to theorem number 1, their intercepted arcs are also congruent. So we say that arc ST, the intercepted arc of angle SET, is congruent to arc NO, the intercepted arc of angle NEO. Another example, if circle E is congruent to circle I and angle SET, angle NEO, and angle GIB are congruent, and evident yan kasi ang degree measures nila ay 50 degrees, then we say that their intercepted arcs are also congruent. So arc ST is congruent to arc NO and also congruent to arc GB. Next theorem. If two chords of a circle or of congruent circles are congruent, then the corresponding minor arcs are congruent. This time, makikita naman natin ang relationship between the minor arcs and chords. So let's have this example. If segment AB is congruent to segment LM, let's say segment AB measures 10 inches and segment LM also measures 10 inches, so they are congruent. Then we say that the arc that subtends these chords are also congruent. So arc AB is also congruent to arc LM. Ganun din naman itong next example. Let's say circle T is congruent to circle N. And the chords, segment AB, segment LM, and segment EO are all congruent, then their arcs or their corresponding minor arcs are also congruent. So we say arc AB, arc LM, and arc EO are also congruent. Let's have the third theorem. If two central angles of a circle or of congruent circles are congruent, then their corresponding chords are also congruent. So let's say we have your circle A, and if angle PAR, so this angle, is congruent to angle SAT, then we say that their corresponding chords, the corresponding chord of angle PAR is segment PR, and the corresponding chord of angle SAT is segment ST. So we say that segment PR is congruent to segment ST. Lastly, let's have this theorem. In a circle, a diameter bisects a chord and an arc with the same endpoints if and only if it is perpendicular to the chord. So let's have this illustration. In circle U, diameter SE bisects chord GN and arc GN, since it is evident in our illustration that segment SE is perpendicular to segment GN. So pag sinabi nating perpendicular, nakabuo tayo ng right angle. So if that is the case, by applying our theorem, we say that arc GE is congruent to arc EN. Since tulad nga sa nabanggit na theorem, so itong segment SE, it bisects arc GN. Nahati niya yung arc GN into two equal parts. So yung arc GE is congruent to arc EN. Likewise, segment SE also bisects chord GN. So we say that GI, this segment GI, is congruent to segment IN. This time, apply naman natin yung learnings natin on congruent circles, congruent arcs, and theorems on arcs, chords, and central angles. Which of the blue arcs are congruent? So let's have number 1. Can we say that arc AB is congruent to arc DC? Yes, arc AB is congruent to arc DC. So based dun sa definition natin, congruent arcs are arcs with the same measure. So arc AB measures 45 degrees and arc DC measures 45 degrees. So since they are both 45 degrees, so they are congruent. Number 2, can we say that arc UW or WU is congruent to arc ZX? Yes, arc WU is congruent to arc ZX. So since nasa magkahiwalay na circles ang dalawang arcs, una muna, check nyo muna kung yung dalawang circles ba ay congruent circles. So, circle T is congruent to circle Y. So, paano natin nasabi na sila ay congruent? So, tingnan nyo yung kanilang radius. So, the radius of circle T measures 4 units at ang radius ng circle Y also measures 4 units. So, di ba ang definition natin ng congruent circles? These are circles with the same length or same measure of radii. So, since parehong 4 units ang kanilang radius, so these two circles are congruent. Now, puntahan na natin yung minor arcs. So, arc W measures 60 degrees and arc ZX measures 60 degrees. So, since these two arcs belong to congruent circles and they both have the same measures, so we say that arc W is congruent to arc ZX. Number 3, is arc JK congruent to arc PQ? So, makikita natin na ang dalawang circles, they are not congruent. So, etong circle L, ang sukat ng kanyang radius ay 6 units at ang sukat ng radius ng circle R is 5 units. So, sa umpisa pa lang, hindi na sila congruent circles. So, we say that arc JK is not congruent to arc PQ. Let's have this next illustration. We have circle A. Name a pair of arcs that are congruent. So, alin sa mga theorem na napag-usapan kanina ang pwede natin gamitin dito? So, pwede nating i-apply dito yung theorems relating the central angle and the minor arcs. So, if two central angles of a circle or of congruent circles are congruent, then the corresponding minor arcs are congruent. So, it is evident, meron na agad tayong nakitang congruent central angles. Asan ang congruent central angles natin? We have angle CAB. Ang sukat niya ay 58 degrees. And angle EAF, which also measures 58 degrees. So, meron tayong two congruent central angles. So, by applying the theorem, we can say that arc CB is congruent to arc EF. Ano pa ang congruent arcs in our illustration? So, kung kukunin natin yung iba pang sukat ng angles in circle A, so meron tayo 72, 58, 158. So, alam naman natin na ang sukat ng circle is 360 degrees. So, kung ito ay 72 plus 58 plus 100 plus 58, so angle DAE is 72 degrees din. So, pwede rin nating sabihin na arc CD is also congruent to arc DE since ang central angles na nag-intercept sa kanila ay congruent. Next, let's have this illustration. Find the length of segment HI. So, dito sa illustration natin, makikita natin na may mga measurement yung arcs and segments or chords. So, ang gagamitin natin or ang i-apply nating theorem is the theorem relating the minor arcs and the chords. So, according to the theorem, if two chords of a circle or congruent circles are congruent, then the corresponding minor arcs are congruent and vice versa. Ganun din kapag may congruent arcs, so yung subtending chords nila ay also congruent. So, pansinin na arc HG or GH is 78 degrees, arc GJ is 91 degrees, and arc JI is 113 degrees. So, kunin natin ang measurement ng arc HI. So, alam naman natin na in a circle, it measures 360 degrees. So, 78 plus 91 plus 113, then i-minus natin sa 360. So, itong arc HI, by simple calculation, arc HI measures 78 degrees. Now, papasok na yung ating application ng theorem. So, since arc GH is congruent to arc HI and it is evident dahil nga pareho sila ng degree measure. So, both measure 78 degrees. So, we say that segment GH is congruent to segment HI. And since segment GH measures 9 units, so segment HI also measures 9 units. Next illustration, if the measure of angle AOP is 155, what is the measure of angle DOC? So, based dito sa illustration natin, we are going to relate the angle, the central angle, and the chord of the circle. So, according sa ating theorem, if two central angles of a circle or of congruent circles are congruent, then the corresponding chords are congruent and vice versa. Ganun din kapag may congruent chords, therefore, yung subtending central angles are also congruent. So, dito if you're going to analyze this illustration, makikita sa mark na ang segment AB is congruent to segment DC. So, the angles subtended by these chords are also congruent. So, we say that angle AOB subtended by this chord is congruent to angle DOC. And since the measure of angle AOB is 155 degrees, therefore the measure of angle DOC is also 155 degrees. For the last illustration, circle O, if segment IG is the diameter, what is the length of segment FJ? So in a circle, the diameter bisects a coordinate arc with the same endpoints if and only if it is perpendicular to the chord. So, makikita naman natin sa illustration that segment IG is perpendicular to segment FH dahil nakabuo sila ng 90 degrees. If that is the case, so the diameter IG bisects chord FH and arc FH. So, pag sinabing bisect, ibig sabihin nahati into two equal parts. So, ibig sabihin yan, yung arc GH is congruent to arc GF and segment JH is congruent to segment JF. And since hinahanap natin ang length ng segment FJ and it is congruent to segment JH whose length is 8 inches, so we say that segment FJ also has a length of 8 inches. Happy learning!